So I'd like to talk for a few minutes about what I'll call inheritance protection planning. And this is a very important topic for many people because the way that your beneficiary receives anything that you leave behind is very important for them, as well as for you, to give you the peace of mind that what you've worked so hard for would be left to somebody in a way that would be protected and that would be managed correctly by them and used for their benefit and not in a way that would harm them. So there's two primary ways to leave an inheritance behind. You can leave it to somebody in a way that what I'll call outright, in a way that they have really no limitations. They receive whatever it is you're going to give them as an individual, and then they have the full flexibility to do whatever they want with it. The other way is to leave it to them in an inheritance trust. And an inheritance trust can be designed with a lot of flexibility, or it can be designed where we have less flexibility and even more protection, depending on what your beneficiary, what their needs are and what you desire for them. So in an outright manner, you'll typically see something like my beneficiary would get a third at 25, and then they'd get another third at 30, and maybe they'd get their final distribution, they'd get the rest of it when they turn 35, and then it would be done. And they would receive that as an individual, and they can do whatever they want with it. Very simple, very traditional. And there's nothing really wrong with that as long as we really thought carefully about how would that play out for your beneficiary. So if they're 30 years old and they receive an outright distribution and they are newly married and they are happily in love and they take that and they put it right into their joint bank account with their spouse, and then they go to Hawaii and they remodel the kitchen, and then a few years go by and something unfortunate, perhaps even surprising, happens and they get a divorce, what now happens to that inheritance they received? Well, it's been commingled and it would be split. Whatever their assets are at that point would be split in a divorce, and there wouldn't have been any divorce protection around that inheritance. Another example with an outright distribution is, what if you leave it to your child who seems responsible enough, but perhaps they've gotten into a bad business deal, and maybe they have some creditors, or maybe their spouse is not financially responsible, and their spouse would help them spend it. So there's a lot of considerations about how to leave an inheritance behind to the people that we care about in a protected way, so that they would get some asset protection, protect them from losing it in a divorce, losing it to creditors, losing it to an unfortunate lawsuit. And the way that we can protect it is by leaving it to them in a trust. We call it a lifetime inheritance trust. And it's really a way to make sure that whatever we leave behind is left in a protected way. So if our beneficiary is somebody who's not good with money, or maybe they are very kind-hearted and maybe even naive, or just vulnerable in some way, could they be talked out of that money? Or could there be somebody who sells them a business opportunity or asks them for a loan? And if they would lose that money, if it was left to them in an outright way, we can protect them by leaving it to them in a trust. And sometimes we have responsible beneficiaries, and they would be great at managing money, but anyone could potentially suffer a divorce. And if they didn't see the divorce coming, which I would think most people wouldn't, they would potentially lose that through a divorce. So we handle that through an inheritance trust, and we can put a lot of flexibility into those trusts or not. Sometimes our vulnerable beneficiaries, we want to give them even more protection through that trust and put on different kinds of help. They may need a co-trustee to help them manage it so that they don't make bad decisions, or they may not need a co-trustee. So there's some flexibility that we can build in to those inheritance trusts to make sure that we've protected the people that we care about from losing it in a divorce, lawsuits, or with creditors.